Welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for April 5th, 2022. And it's very obvious that we do have April showers, and that means May flowers, but I think we're ready for spring here. Item number 1, if we could call the roll, please.
Member Brennan? Here. Councilmember Lehman? Here. Councilmember Whiting?
Here.
Councilmember Contreras?
Here.
Mayor Mars?
Here, thank you very much. Item number 2, if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, the approval of the agenda. Are there any corrections, additions, updates, Mr. Reynolds?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I have a couple. First of all, we're going to remove 4A4 from the agenda in total, and we will be bringing that back at the next meeting. We will be removing 4A5 from the consent agenda, and then I have some more changes to the consent agenda once we get there.
We're putting, so 4A4 is completely off.
Yes, sir.
4A5 is moving to, moving off consent.
Correct.
Excellent. And then, okay, others? Others? Councilor Whiting?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as modified. I have a motion and a second for the modified consent agenda, which includes the removal of 4A4 and the moving of 4A5 off of consent. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. Up next, the consent agenda, which was previously noted that 4A5 is being removed. And others? Or Mr. Reynolds?
I have one change in the consent agenda. We'll amend item 4A1 to remove the electric superintendent Brad Carlson from the listed staff present in the minutes, and they would ask you to consider that as amended.
Okay, so 4A1 will stand amended, and for now stay on consent. Councilor Brennan?
I'll make a motion to approve the modified consent agenda.
I have a motion and a second for the modified consent agenda, which would include amended wording on 4A1 and 4A5 off consent as previously noted. Discussion, otherwise, before we vote on the modified consent agenda, we would read the modified consent agenda into the public record. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. These are the consent agenda items for 5 April of 2022. 4A1 approves the City Council meeting minutes for 15 March and 29 March 2022 as amended. 4A2 approves the amended investment policy. 4A3 approves the amended social media policy. 4B1 approves various concession agreements with Park and Recs. 4C1 approves Rhythm on the Rails event application layout and road and lot closures. 4C2 adopts Resolution R 2022-050 approving the final plat of Whispering Waters 2nd Edition. 4C3 adopts Resolution R 2022-042 approving an application for the City of Shakopee to participate in the Minnesota Green Corps Host Site Program. 4C4 adopts Resolution R 2022-055 setting a public hearing date for a vacation of public drainage and utility easements in Summerland Place 1st Edition. 4C5 adopts Resolution R 2022-054 setting a public hearing date for a vacation of public drainage and utility easements in Powers 2nd Edition. 4D1 adopts Resolution R 2022-051 authorizing the city's annual maintenance for seal coat, crack sealing, pavement marking, and fog sealing, and a portion of the 2022 pavement rehabilitation project in the amount of $605,310. 42, adopts resolution number R 2022 TAC 048, accepting work on the 12th Avenue Trail project and authorizing final payment. 4D3, adopts resolution R 2022 TAC 049, accepting work on the 12th Avenue reconstruction project and authorizing final payment. 4D4, approves a contract with Pipe Services Corporation in the amount of $31,408 for the 2022 sanitary sewer and storm sewer televising project. 4D5, approves a contract with Gopher State Seal Coat in the amount of $54,804.55 for the 2022 trail seal coating project. And 4D6, adopts resolution R22 TAC 053, authorizing application for the 2022 Regional Solicitation Roadway Modernization Grant.
Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much. I do have a motion for the modified consent agenda and a second. It has been read into the public record. There would be no further discussion. All in favor, say aye. 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 Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you very much. Let's move ahead to item number 5. Now I'd like to call on any resident citizen that would like to come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda tonight. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome on an item not on the agenda. Mr. Reynolds, have we received any electronic communication?
Nothing for anything that's not on the agenda, sir.
Seeing none, then, we would move ahead to item number 6, which is business removed from consent. And we have one item, 4A5, which is the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission salary increase request. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In consultation with the city attorney, we realized that Councilor Brennan would not be able to vote on this particular matter, so that's why I removed it from consent, and so it's now available for your action.
I'm going to step away for a minute. Oh.
Okay. Councilor Whiting.
Mr. Mayor, this is this is a resolution raising the Public Utilities Commission salary $100. So with that, I would make a motion to adopt Resolution R 2022 TAC 057, increasing the monthly Shakopee Public Utility Commission salary from $400 to $500. The Commission President monthly salary from $500 to $600, and the MMPA representative monthly salary to $100.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on this item, and in reviewing it, actually as a past board member, it's almost been 10 years since there's been any increase for this appointed board of our arm length of our city. Remind everybody that the utility is a $50 million enterprise fund, and there is a lot of work in there. Small stipend for their effort. I think previous to the 2013 adjustment, I think there was also another 10 years prior to that for any adjustment on that. So barely keeping up with inflation. They do some good work, and there has been some hard work in the last couple of years, but that comes with the job, and nobody really does it for the money. I understand that, but I'm in favor of this and that. Councilor Lehman.
The last increase was 2013, is that correct?
Yeah.
All right.
And it comes to us as a request from the utility manager, doing some review, and then the city council has purview of that, so. Mr. Reynolds.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would stress that this does not come from the city budget. It actually comes from Shakopee Public Utilities budget. You know, I really think that we have a responsibility to ensure that those that give so much time and effort to the city as part of our appointed boards and commissions are adequately compensated for that. We're actually going to bring are a couple other, the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, they receive $50 a month. That hasn't been adjusted in a long time either. The amount of work that these citizens do, is pretty amazing. And you're right, they don't do it for the money. But the reality is that we really should make sure that we're compensating them for their time. And so I am 100% in support of this. It's absolutely something that staff is behind.
Counselor Whiting?
Well, this isn't a raise in pay as far as, because we know that Public Utilities has been doing great work, really digging in lately, and this doesn't, reflect that in any way. And so this is just to compensate for over the time where we haven't compensated. But I think it's a great opportunity to really tell people that the Public Utilities Commission, they are very dedicated for this small amount of money, and they dig into that work, and especially lately with some of the challenges. But they are fully committed, and it is a board seat on a $50 million enterprise. So that's my comments. I think it's time.
Others? Others? Otherwise, I do have a motion and a second on the table. Further discussion? 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 All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
You oppose?
No, I was in favor, but I was coughing.
You want to vote again?
Sure.
So that passes 4 with 4-0 with 1 abstention. Thank you very much. All right, let's move ahead then to item number 7. I would stand for a motion to recess to our EDA meeting. Councilor Contreras.
I'd like to make a motion to recess to our EDA meeting.
I can second that.
I have a motion and a second by Councilor Whiting. Further discussion? Discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Madam President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I call to order the Shakopee Economic Development Authority meeting of April 5th, 2022. If staff can please note the roll. Number 2 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
There's been a motion and a second by Contreras to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those against? Motion passes 5-0. Number 3 on the agenda is the consent business, and there's 2 items on the consent business. There's item number 3A, which is the EDA minutes, and item number 3B, which is the Second Amendment to Tax Increment Pledge Agreement. And if I can get a motion, Mr. Mars?
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated.
There's been a motion,
Second.
second by Whiting, to approve the consent business. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Motion passes 5-0. Next on the business is the general business, and item 4A, which is regarding the acquiring master lease agreement for River City Center, and Mr. Kursky is presenting tonight.
Good evening, Madam President and board members. So, as is mentioned, this is a discussion about the master lease at River City Center. So, just to familiarize yourself again, I know most of you know this building pretty well, but it takes up the entire side, the north side of First Avenue, consists of 2 buildings joined with a bridge. This is the plaza that we redid back in 2017, and the statue of Reverend Pond. And this is looking west, and you can see the retail space along here with the small awnings, the red and green awnings, and then the back of the building. It's interesting, we've had some people looking at this, and they have all commented that actually the back's really the front, so that most people coming into the city actually see the back of this building, and that there would be potentially some room for improvement on both signage and the way people enter from the rear.
Should have seen it a few years ago.
Can imagine. So Staff for about 2 years has been in discussion with the current owners of the master lease. Currently, the EDA owns all of the ground at River City Center, so we are actually the property owner. Currently, there's 2 bond payments left on a city GO bond for the commercial space. That's $214,000 a year. So there's a payment due this year and a payment due next year, and then that bond is retired. It was supposed to retire in 2025, but it was refunded at a lower rate. And then there's still our GO bonds from the city on the residential portion that are paid off in 2027. Property taxes right now are about $37,000 a year for the commercial section. The residential does not pay general property taxes. The CDA pays a pilot on the senior housing portion. Common expenses for the commercial section are about $6,000 a year. The master lease tenant has no more obligations to basically anyone after 2025, and actually the EDA becomes the master lease holder in 2025, and the EDA gets the entire development back in 2035. So in 2025, since the bonds were paid off, the agreements were that the CDA, who currently collects the money from the master tenant, would step out, and the EDA steps in as the master leaseholder. So the current master tenant, I think as a general feeling, has not fulfilled the vision of the original development. There's a drug rehab clinic, an insurance agent, a smoke shop, martial arts studio, and a concrete company in there. The master tenant has agreed to surrender its lease for $178,000, which basically they've paid commission on tenants, and the realtors get paid over time for those tenants' leases, and so we'd be paying off the commissions that are due on that. If the city, or the EDA were to assume, we would work with an architect on repositioning the commercial area. We had, I think, our RSP or RPS, I can't remember which name, they're a retail firm that does work all over the country. They happen to be headquartered in Minneapolis. They did look at the building last Friday and had some ideas on how we could do some things to position the building better. The EDA would examine exterior improvements like doors, awnings, and tenant allowances. Right now, there are no tenant allowances from the current master leaseholder. And the EDA would use current TIF pooling funds that we have, which is about $500,000, and then borrow from itself against cash flow from the rents to reposition the commercial and do repairs. There are some needed repairs on the first floor, and I can show that a little better. One of the things the architects noticed is on the First Avenue side, you can see this heavy bead of caulk that runs along both sides of the buildings. There has been water infiltration into both the units and into the parking garage. So we're going to have to look at how that can be fixed in the long term, because caulk's really not going to cut it. This was done not that long ago, and it's already deteriorating from the amount of water. Today was a good example. There was a significant amount of water in some of the areas. So one of the reasons why the master tenant has been, I think, willing to discuss moving on is that one of them is retired to Florida. One of them has sold the company that was actually doing most of the work in this building. So I don't think there's a big incentive for them to really do much anymore in the building. Currently, the cash flow is above $300,000 a year based on the current tenants that they have. So our proposal would have some discussion tonight, and if you would choose to move forward, we would retain, currently Kenyon and Graven has a conflict because they also represent the CDA, so they can't represent us in this transaction, but we have an outside real estate firm that would review all of the leases and agreements and make sure that everything's fine, and then we have a separate outside counsel that would look at the finances. Baker Tilly, we were able to get Friday night all of the leases and the current rent roll, and we did have a discussion with them. This project, once the $214,000 a year is paid off, actually has pretty significant cash flow. So basically, we would have the ability to borrow from ourselves, pay back at 4% based on the significant cash flow, which will be about $3 million over the next 10 years.
Thank you, Michael, for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Kursky?
No.
Mr. Lehman?
Madam President, I would like to see a more in-depth analysis of the building before we go any further. How old's the roof, HVAC, air conditioning, water damage, so on and so forth, before I even go any further with any discussion.
So, President, Commission member, board member, the city would only be assuming the first floor. The CDA still owns the roof, all the mechanical equipment, and everything else in the building. Our agreement, which is long, is the city only has responsibility for the commercial space in the building. So from basically the awning signboard down is the city's responsibility under the master agreement.
Including the parking garage, which is for residential.
We are not responsible for the parking garage. It's a separate agreement that goes back. So only the tenants in that building can use that parking garage, and they're responsible for the maintenance of that garage.
Did you have any comments, Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, the real concern that we have here is that we're getting this in 2035, whether we want it or not. And there's really no incentive for the current organization responsible for this to provide any capital improvements or just capital maintenance during that time period. So our real fear, to be very frank, is that we would get it at 2035 we already know there are issues. There's going to be a decade more of issues, and then we're really going to be in a position where we're going to have to put major money into this, where if we could get it now and start that process and take care of some of these issues now, and also, frankly, be a little more proactive when it comes to leasing the spaces and providing amenities that people actually want to come in and rent those spaces. Because the reality is this lease, when it was put together, very much favors the current leaseholder. And there's nothing that says that they have to put a dime into it for the foreseeable future, and we're going to get it at 2035. And you know, I think that there's a real problem with that if we don't get a hold of this and are able to do some investments now to fend off those big issues that are coming into the future. It will be a major draw on the EDA's finances.
Are there any questions? Mr. Whiting?
More of a comment, and I kind of want to sweep back to, many of us here remember the whole, was it blocks 3 and 4 discussion, and all that went on, and how one hand fed the other from a mayor to, you know, how it worked back in the history of it. I don't want to get too deep into that, but the whole building really never met the vision that I remember being talked about. And I joked with Mr. Kursky about seeing the back side of that building, and that was a major push to put that building in, was because people coming into our town would see the back of this building, and it would be so much better. And it is better, but it could be much better.
Could be great.
And so we've done some things, though, that we took the fence down, did some things to help that. But to me, the tenants, you know, it's the way it's structured now is a senior building. I don't think it's assisted or anything, but over 55 or over certain
55 plus.
55
and it's
plus.
also subsidized.
Subsidized. So to me, in that area with all the bars and restaurants, we're not helping our downtown with clientele by any means. So that, you know, that's still going to go on until 2035, until that whole aspect of being a 55 plus building changes. But we are responsible for the tenants, and to help spur economic development downtown, many of them tenants do, but some of them really don't help the rest of the neighborhood, basically. So to me, anything we can do to help have control of, we're already doing some of the legwork with our staff, so being able to invest the money that's going in and reinvest it back in the building, which isn't happening now or could be done better, to me, that's important, so, I can see the value in this.
Or Mr. Morris?
Madam President, thank you. I do agree. I followed this history on that building, and actually in 95, 6, 7, when it was built, I mean, I think that was cutting edge. It was supposed to be that cutting edge of housing above and retail down below, lifestyle housing. You know, it just really was really cutting edge, and now we've seen all sorts of communities do things like this with housing above and then commercial down below. And I do believe it cleaned up the blight that we had in our community and made it more welcoming. We've improved it by the fence coming down, the statue out in front. I mean, I envision lights on the top, on the roof line to really set it off. But I think that the commercial has always struggled, and we've been through a couple recessions, so I get that part. But to me, it's never been really 100% full, and I guess the economic times are what they are, but I thought there would be boutique shops and you know, maybe a restaurant or something that, and nothing wrong with the businesses currently, but I think it could be better. And this has been worked on for a long time. My questions are more concerning to the master tenant on the commercial part. You said there are 2 more payments of $214 each?
Madam President, that's correct. There's a payment due in 2022 and a payment due in 2023.
And that payment in 2022, is that coming up in the next 60 days?
I believe it is either June 1st or July 1st.
June, yeah. Be great if they could make that. Also, I do understand the separation of the residential and the commercial, and I want to know what we're getting into too, but define it from the commercial aspect, right? I've been told in the last 2 years that the master tenant, if you wanted to lease a space, didn't have money to do the build-out, which is common in this industry. When you lease a space, you might build it out to your thing and then do that, and they didn't have the money, and then the CDA didn't offer that money as well. So some of those things are a little concerning, and I think this is an opportunity to enhance, make better, and maybe bring back some of the vision that it was really supposed to do for our downtown. It has improved our downtown, don't get me wrong. We have residents upstairs, we do have businesses, but I just think it could be a lot more. But I do have some questions. More questions is you said the TIF pool is there, do we retain 10% of the TIF for administration expense? Is that what you were talking about?
Excuse me, Madam President and board members, so I think a couple meetings ago you approved pooling. It was a change in the state law. So that's administration money from all of our TIF districts that we haven't spent on administration, and they allowed that be pooled. There's very specific things that can be done with it. So like, we went with the architects through the building, and some of the vacant spaces are the same way they were when the building was built, basically improving that to a vanilla shell, which is pretty common in any shopping center. That would be an eligible expense, as would be fixing some of the sidewalks and doing some of the improvements. And then they mentioned the back, one of them lives right across the river, and so he comes all the time at night to go downtown, and he said that building is kind of dark, and it's nice that the statue is well lit, but to get some better lighting for those retail tenants and to uplight the building a little better, because it's very kind of dark and foreboding at night, that would also be an eligible expense.
I keep on pushing it through those lights because the uniqueness of the roof line with the, you know, it's not a flat roof, it's not a peak roof, it has very unique features, and,
Madam President, the other thing I'll say is, so Jen Brewington, who works on our economic development side, we've had some really good high-quality tenants that have basically become frustrated and gone other places. There was someone did full architectural plans to renovate one of those spaces, and the reluctance on the part of the current property owner to do some things and to negotiate, they've walked away. And it's interesting, since we started this discussion, a local tenant in town approached and said, I talked to the broker, but he said I should really talk to you because they're going to be talking about this tonight. I like to move in the building. I'm happy paying a market rent, but I want to know that the building is going to get some upkeep because I'm moving from a building right now that's not well upkeep, and I don't want to be in that same situation. So there are some local people looking at this as an opportunity, and I think it's got potential. I mean, I think when we had Baker Tilly go through their financials, I mean, once the bond's paid off, there's a significant amount of cash flow here that could be reinvested back into the building.
Mr. Lehman?
Yeah, thanks. A couple of things. The property maintenance code would take care of them maintaining their building. And from the get-go, I thought it was really stupid to put senior housing in a bar district. It just seemed to conflict with each other from day one. Still does. So if I'm understanding what Councilor Whiting was saying, that the 55 and older, that stays? Or does that go at some point?
Board members, so in 2035, the project comes back to you all, and that would be your decision what to do with the project in 2035. Whether it stays, I mean, right now it has some subsidy. I'm going to bet you that in 2035 that subsidy will have run out, and it's a question then what you want to do with the property. The CDA does have a right of first refusal to purchase the upper portion back on the land from the city in 2035.
So that discussion will occur regardless of what we talk about tonight.
Madam President, that's correct. I mean, I think we're here tonight to say there's an opportunity. I think we were all surprised. Our attorneys talked to their attorneys last year when the CDA was in the process of changing leadership, and we brought this up with a joint meeting of some of you and some of the county commissioners, that this building was not performing to what the expectation was 20 years ago, and what could we as a community do. And so our attorneys went back to the master tenant attorneys and said, look, would you work with us and try and reinvest in the building, and we'll see if we can come up with some plan. And they said, absolutely, have no interest in ever talking to you. So that was the end of the discussion. We were surprised when their attorney called a couple weeks ago and said, hey, we'd like to get bought out and move on. So.
Okay. Is there any other questions? Mr. Lehman?
Well, if they own 2 bond payments or $428,000 over the next 2 years, you know, buying them out for peanuts on a dollar to what they owe, aren't we then taking on that debt?
So, Madam President, board members, I think our goal would be to negotiate a settlement on this year's payment because they've collected rent for January, February, and March, and I'm not sure when we'll be back to you with a proposal. They're still going to be collecting all that money that they make this year's payment. And so, yes, next year we would have to make that payment. But again, if we did nothing, just left the building as it is, it nets out well over $300,000, so that bond payment and the property taxes are covered.
Okay, Mr. Myers?
Yeah, you know, I agree, the 214 and then the buyout of the 180, maybe I think we should try to move forward and get some more information and be in a position, but if the bond payment, you know, they collect that rent, that goes towards the 2022 bond payment, and then we're looking at the buyout and then in a position to, make the last payment next year, something like that. I don't know how that'd work, but.
Mr. Reynolds?
And I think it's important, Madam President and members, to understand that we won't be making the 2014 out of any EDA funding. The rent that currently is there will cover that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to Mr. Reynolds' point, we're planning on using other TIF funds that we have available to do the improvements and get the space back to where it needs to be. The project cash flow is fine. There's leases still in place. People are paying on the leases. You know, over the next 4 or 5 years, those leases start coming up and we'll either renegotiate them or we'll get new tenants. I think one of our concerns is one of the most recent leases they signed is about $7 below market, and it's a long-term lease, and we're kind of surprised that they would kind of torpedo that space at a well below market rent. So when I think if you decide we should continue with this, our new attorneys will have a discussion with their attorneys to say, no more doing any deals until we decide whether we're moving forward, because it really could hurt the EDA in the long run if they keep signing deals that are well below market.
All right, Mr. Lehman?
One more question. What's the chances of the current property tax received being reduced in the future with the EDA taking it over?
Madam President and board members, so there was a lawsuit. We actually met with one of the tax assessors today and a bunch of other issues. There was a lawsuit that fixed for the moment that payment at a pretty significant amount based on that lawsuit. So since this is an income-producing property for the EDA, we would be liable for the property taxes. So that $37,000 we have to pay.
Okay.
And some of the tenants actually have a lease payment and a tax payment on top of that. So some of the property tax is currently being paid by some of the tenants through their lease.
Okay. Is there any other questions? I think this is a great opportunity to look at. I think it will improve the area for the whole downtown. I know that there's been a number of those units that have remained empty, and I go down there and they're still empty and it's been years. It's the same units empty. I like the idea of, and that's not part of what we're discussing tonight, but if we can have the front entrance on the other side of the building and hopefully draw people into that parking lot and change the parking in the downtown, I think that would be really be a benefit also. So, does anybody else have any other questions? Do you have enough information to move forward? Are we in agreement that we should move forward, or?
So, Madam President, we'll bring back to you either the next meeting or the meeting following that, hopefully in a level of an agreement that we can get down to the nitty-gritty on payments, et cetera. And we'll have a report back by the architects kind of here's the top 10 things you should do. Here's the top 5 things you need to do now versus later.
Okay. Ms. Contreras?
Yep, I'll just add, I am in agreement with it. I'd like to see more. I know there's potential for sure. We spoke about this. I feel there's something that is missing that will attract. You said, what is it? I'm like, oh, I don't know. But there is potential, and I do like the idea if we could use the back parking lot, that would switch out a lot of different, just rearrange other parking. That'd be great. Yeah, let us know more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 4B, which is the September 9th through 10th, 2022 Innovation Weekend. And Mr. Kursky.
Come on.
Microsoft.
So, Madam President, board members, this was something that came up with our entrepreneur group that's been meeting for almost a year now about doing something different in Shakopee, and particularly the downtown, that would attract other entrepreneurs and other people interested in Shakopee. And so one of the things we're talking about doing is a Friday night event on the historic Home Street Bridge that would be tented, because it's something we really haven't used it for anything besides people riding their bikes or walking on it. We've talked to the sous chef, who has been nominated for 2 2022 James Beard Awards, about catering it. Scott County, we've talked to them. They would provide a permit to allow us to use the bridge. And then the next day, we'll talk about in a second, we're working on a craft brew festival, but the Friday night event would be craft brewmasters, entrepreneurs, local CEOs, local investors, some folks from the SMSC, and then some national investors. I did a similar event when I was in Greenville. In the first year, we had pretty good attendance and people started getting interested. The second year, one of the investors there made a $45 million investment in the community. So it takes a little while to build kind of imaging, branding about the community, but I think this is a good start. There are a number of local CEOs, frankly, that I think we could engage with this event that have been, from we've heard, looking at other places to say to them, we really appreciate them and want them to really see what's happening in our community. So this is kind of just a concept layout. We would have a tent on the bridge for the dinner, and they would have a food trailer at that end that would actually do all the food preparation. Get this thing to work. And then Saturday night, or Saturday during the day from, I think it's 1 to 4, would be a pre-ticketed event for a beer festival with a commemorative tasting glass. Brewers would receive a $250 stipend. We've been working with some folks at RAR and also with actually a brewery consultant out of Idaho that's been doing a lot of brewing events, and said basically you're getting the beer donated to the community, but they still have to pay their staff and their travel. Craft brewmasters would offer their current beers and then what we're calling a new startup beer for the event. So that would be something different, some kind of beer they've never made before that they would feature at the event. Attendees would be able to vote through an app on their favorite startup brew, and then the winner would receive a trophy, and one of our entrepreneurs has agreed to provide at cost a very high-end Otso mountain bike, which right now you're waiting probably 6 months to get one, so they said they would be willing to put us in the queue because I think this would be a huge event because bikes and beer go together really well. And this is kind of the layout we've worked with our consultant on, so there would be an entry area right here that people would scan their tickets because they'd buy them online in advance. This Lewis Street parking lot worked out perfectly actually for where all the brewers would go. We'd have food along 2nd Avenue and then a small stage at the end. Because one of the things we found is people really like to talk to the brewers, so keep any noise away from where the brewers would be. So the projected attendance from our consultants at a first-year event like this would do between 750 and 1,000 people. And he said if the weather's really good, he probably could do 1,200 to 1,500. But he said September, it's kind of, this is the beginning of the end of the season, and but it's a good kind of fall event. And they looked at this parking lot, they thought it would be a great setup right in the downtown.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kursky. Is there any questions? Mr. Mars?
Madam President, would there be music involved?
Madam President, board members, so probably something not that loud. I mean, one of the things the consultant said is people that are really into this, and this will be a kind of a different beer festival, really want to talk to the people from the breweries. So he said so some kind of background music.
Okay.
Mr. Lehman?
What's the purpose of this event?
It's to start bringing other people to the community and do a different kind of event downtown. We've never had kind of a brewery-centric event, and RAR, which is really the historic brew, how we're brewing really started here. I watched a video the other day. I never realized that, you know, without RAR, you would not have beer. And so we've been working with our staff on how do we make this not your typical beer event. The Friday night event really is there's some very big people that have heard about our entrepreneur event that want to come together and kind of basically meet with other people. And I think from a social standpoint, to have them in a really unusual space, they'll be willing to make that trip. I mean, I've already had a call from a person that I happen to know who was involved with Google, Amazon, all the big names you can think of, who's in California, who said, for this event, I would fly here and talk to your people and maybe do some investment in your community.
So is this all about brewing beer?
Beer and entrepreneurs and bicycles kind of all go together. So it really is about using one of our kind of innovative assets, which is RAR and our brewing history here, as a hook, along with luckily having a Native American chef in our community that has a pretty well-known name to attract some people to the community that would never think about coming to Shakopee.
Okay.
So we're going to pay $40,000 to have a bunch of people get together to drink beer and eat. And the ticket sales go toward what?
So the ticket sales will go back to pay that $40,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I put that down because what if something catastrophic happens? You know, we get a new knock on some fake wood virus or something, and all of a sudden the event can't happen, and we'll have some expenses up front. But our goal is that the Saturday event pays for the Friday event.
Okay.
And they're kind of combined together, so it's kind of a nice pairing.
Okay, Mr. Mars?
I'm very intrigued about this opportunity. I mean, our community is home to the world's largest single malt maker in the world. And craft brewing, in your day, Counselor Lehman, you know, that's a pretty big deal, and they have their own group. We have a couple here in our community. There's no let up on the craft beer and how they do it, and I think this is a pretty unique opportunity to showcase Shakopee. Every craft brewer that I've been in the last 5 years buys product from RAR, and right here in Shakopee, and I think I'm a little surprised we haven't thought of this idea earlier. But I think this would be a pretty cool, and the innovator aspect as we move forward, hopefully with the Innovation Hub. And I know brewers are just one aspect of it all. But I think it'd be pretty intriguing.
Mr. Whiting?
No, I think in order, I agree with everything you say, but you have to start somewhere. So you start with this, and maybe next year it includes a home brewing aspect to it or something expands off of that, or maybe it becomes craft distilling involved with it, and it grows from there. But that's how these events start, and it's a stretch when you have to, for the first time. But you're right, our downtown is set up for it. Our current industry makes it a perfect place for it, so I would support this.
Okay. Is there any other comments? Ms. Contreras?
I don't have much to say. I don't drink, but obviously I'm not looking at it that way. I'm looking at it in the innovation, looking at it on what we can do and how, like the mayor said, how we could showcase Shakopee. So I'm for it. I'd like to see, and I guess, again, you have to invest to be able to see what you can, get out of it. So if that's what, we start, and hope, with nothing happening, we'll get our money back the next day, so.
Okay. Any other questions? I think it's a great opportunity also. I'm really thrilled about using the bridge and having that. That's such a unique area that would be very memorable to new investors that are coming in and finding out more about Shakopee. And I noticed that it was using the SPU Economic Development Funds, and I talked to SPU today, and I said, well, what do you think about that, using those funds? And it seemed like a perfect fit for what they envisioned it, envisioning those funds as being used for, drawing in new people, having them look at the community. So I think it's great. So, yep.
Just one added thing, I think if we could encourage more breweries or something like that, that would be a high water user, so it would be a perfect use for that. And that might not happen, but potential.
Well, we're going to have 3 soon, so.
Okay, really? Okay. That's right. Yep.
One opening downtown.
Yep.
All right. Do you have enough information?
No, good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the 5A, which is the EDA bill list. Was there any questions regarding the bill list? Okay. And next on the agenda is number 6, which is the adjournment to Tuesday, May 3rd. Can I get a motion? Ms. Contreras?
Yep, I'll make the motion to adjourn to Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022 at 7 p.m.
Okay, and a second by Lehman? Lehman? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Meeting is adjourned.
We'll reconvene the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for April 5th, 2022. We have just come out of our EDA meeting, and we're going to move ahead to Number 9A1, flavored tobacco and vaping ordinance changes. Michael will present. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we talked about this a few meetings ago. We did publish the ordinance on our website for about a month. I provided in the packet all of the digital comments that we got. There were a few more, I believe, that got sent directly to you from a number of other organizations in the community, and we did receive a letter today, which we put on the table for you.
Questions of staff? Counselor Whiting?
Now, I believe Prior Lake put together an ordinance that is very similar or the same.
Mayor and Council, this, I would say, identical to Prior
Identical,
Lakes,
okay.
with a couple minor tweaks to match our ordinance.
And I noticed that many other communities in the state and even way out in western part of the state, Traverse County, Browns Valley, Moorhead, they all have prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco, including menthol. And then throughout the Twin Cities, several communities either just do the sales of fruit-flavored, candy-flavored tobacco, or all flavored, including menthol, or sometimes they don't include menthol. So somewhere within that range, several communities are moving forward with that, would you say?
Mayor and Council, that's correct. In fact, there are larger cities, and way larger cities than us, that have banned all tobacco sales. Bloomington is one. They believe it's July 1. There's no kind of tobacco sales allowed in the city at all. I think we, working on the Prior Lake ordinance and what else we've seen, still allowed menthol and tobacco-flavored vaping supplies, because if you're getting off cigarettes or whatever, that's one way you can transition out, but we would ban all of the candy flavors and all the fruit flavors and things like that, which are much more attractive to younger people.
No, I think I agree with you. In fact, I've seen some of the displays, and some of them were sent out too, you know, with the mango and the fruits and the punches and you know, and there seems to be a lot of people, and a lot of the letters that were sent to us were trying to say, hey, great job, but I think you could go farther. You should go farther. And I guess maybe for discussion purposes, why would we not go farther? I guess I would think, why would we want to bring this back again and talk about doing it again in the future, maybe to go a little farther and a little farther? Why wouldn't we just say all flavored tobaccos? I guess that's where I would be. I think this is we're a little short on this ordinance, but I guess I'd leave it open and for discussion, possibly table it, bring it back for more robust, if possible.
Okay, further discussion or questions of staff? Counselor Brennan?
Most of what I read in the ordinance was referring to selling the product to children, and most of the letters that I received and the comments that I received were regarding selling the product to children, and I know that we currently have in our ordinance that we can't sell product to children that are under 21 years of age, and so I feel that we are addressing this already, and I would suggest that maybe we should look at, instead of banning the product, making that penalty for the compliance test when that happens. Maybe the penalties need to be a little stiffer so that they're more adhered to. And today I asked for a list of the ones those businesses that didn't pass the compliance test well, I asked for 2021, but 20 and 21. And I got a couple more years, and I just think that we need to maybe look at enforcing that penalty phase a little bit more, and maybe the reinstatement of the future license when they failed their compliance test, and maybe that have it focused more on the relicensing of that business.
Other comments to staff? Counselor Lehman?
I have a couple of points, Mayor. First, I find it hard to believe that a city government thinks that they can supersede the federal government. I think we have that part backward. When the federal government approves something to put on the market and a city government decides they're gonna ban a product that's approved by the federal government, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But if I use that same mindset, I can say, okay, a cell phone is an approved product in the United States, but since people tend to drive and text, how many lives could we save? How many injuries could be avoided if we ban the sale of cell phones in Shakopee? That's using the same mindset, okay? The same could be said for flavored alcohol. Well, any alcohol for that matter. We could prevent DWIs, violence, car injuries, deaths. And I would have to think that the flavored alcohol, like blackberry brandy, which, hey, I admit I was attracted to it as a child. I drank my share. These are all targeted with their flavorings as vaping products, but why are they not targeted? So there's a lot of areas here that I think is way out of the city's lane, to be honest. And, you know, if there's a loophole, it's up to the federal government to fix their loophole. If the state or the feds want to ban these products, fine. That's their prerogative. It would filter down to us and it would be automatically off the shelves, like herbicides or Roundup or whatever it was. So this is not a new thing in this country, but somehow these cities think they can just ban legalized products because it's their forte. And I disagree with that whole mindset. I think people make choices. It's not the product we're trying to change here. We're trying to change people's actions. We're trying to change how they act and how they respond, or how we're trying to make people be responsible, and we're taking it out on a product if somebody's using it irresponsible or underage or whatever. And, you know, the statistics will show that the best way to get people to respond to actions is with education. Usually if you educate somebody about something and they're listening, they can make an informed decision. And, you know, life in general is not guaranteed, and it's full of risk, including a bar of soap in the shower. It could kill you. So, you know, do you want to live free, or do you want to live free and happy and have some danger in your life, whether it's getting run over by a car crossing the street or just not waking up overnight? Or do you want to live in a tyranny state where the government's going to give you some kind of promise of security that doesn't exist? That's what it comes down to me. I think we're way out of line here, to be honest.
Thank you. Counselor Whiting?
I'd like to just address something specifically, Councilor Lehman said, but the FDA has issued a ruling in February 2020 that banned flavored disposable e-cig cartridges. So they're moving forward on this already, and you mentioned that it shouldn't start from the top down, but in every situation where something gets changed in the U.S. government, it starts at a local level, it grows, and then it gets adopted by the federal court, and then moves on.
That's not a true statement.
Not everything, but many things.
The FDA and the ATF do these approvals, not cities.
Counselor Contreras?
Thank you. I got a lot of information, and I read it, and I read every comment, and I didn't take it lightly. A lot of it against, and I get it, I get it, and it's not fair that, you know, we're being like, oh, you're telling us what. Not talking to those responsible taxpayers. To me, it's like, I'm talking about the kids, and I, not only did I talk to high schoolers, but I also spoke to middle schoolers, because now it's in middle school, it's going that low. And I said, what is it? Just tell me, what is it that attracts you? And they're like, the flavor. And I'm like, but don't you get it that addicts you? They're like, not really. The flavor covers it. It's like you don't even think you're doing anything bad. So to me, it's like they're telling you it's the flavor. I'm like, so if there wasn't any flavors out there, would you still do it? And they're like, well, probably not, because it's nasty. And I said, okay, so if there was no more flavors, and then we're joking around, like, what's your favorite? They're like, mango, it's like the best, and the blueberry, it's awesome. Okay, so I'm like, if those didn't exist anymore, would you still go, ask your big brother? Because I kept saying, where are you getting it from? You're 14, you're 12. And they're like, oh, seniors, because they're older, right? They have access to it. Or my older sibling, because they're older, they can go out and get it. And I'm like, okay, so it's a huge issue. So last year, I'm reading some things. We saw over 135,000 patients, more than 1,200 of those patients were from Shakopee, Children's Minnesota. And again, here it's like, the substance found in Kool-Aid and Jolly Ranchers. I looked, and I'm not trying to hurt our businesses, or I'm not trying to hurt our responsible taxpayers like those comments read. I understand, but you're so responsible, then you are going to care about the ones who are not, who don't have that mindset or aren't responsible, and then you will get up and just, maybe drive that extra wherever you have to go get it or get it ordered. I understand, and I know I've read those messages. Another one, Minnesota student survey back from 2019. 26% of Shakopee 11th graders reported using an e-cigarette vape in the last 30 days. 26% of the 11th graders. And another, why? Because of the low cost. Because, the attractive packaging. If it's not targeting our kids, then put it in a black and white package and make it be non-attractive, and don't put flavors in it, because it's not for them. I'm all for it. And if we can go more, I'll go for it. It's not, and I can't compare, sorry, but the comparison of alcohol and cigarettes is not apples to apples. It's very different. That's all I have to say. I'm for it. I'm willing to pass it right now.
Okay, more? Counselor Lehman, any other questions of our staff? Seeing none, then we would hold discussion here at the council. Counselor Lehman.
Mayor, I find it amazing that the United States House of Representatives just passed a bill decriminalizing marijuana, and we're taking this up.
Mayor?
Counselor Contreras.
Again, we're not comparing apples to apples, because marijuana, if you look at it medically, it has a purpose. Medically, it's very different, and that's totally a different story. So I would never compare this, because I have a nephew who has seizures, and that helps medically. It's very different. Using it, and that is going to be regulated very, that's not sorry.
Okay, Counselor Whiting.
The past, when we had this discussion a few weeks ago, there was some data, and I didn't bring it with me, but it talked about the age groups of, after the age, I think it was 26, typically people won't pick up smoking. But getting them hooked at age 12 was the target age. And I remember smoking a Swisher Sweet at age 12, and I don't remember where I got it, but I got it somewhere. And then that stuff was more easily, readily available more then. But now it's more clearly targeted. There was some pictures down at the gas station. They have it right there on the counter with all the grape and mango and blueberry flavors that look all fancy. And to me, without those flavors, you wouldn't be hooking those kids at 12. That's the future growth of their clientele, and that's where they need to grab them at. I think if we can keep it out of their hands until they are of age, when they can buy it, chances are they won't become addicted to it. And it's just the fact that these, to me, are clearly targeted to kids. So With that, I would make a motion to adopt ordinance 02022-001, amending sections 110 TAC 055, 110.056, and 110.059 of the Shakopee City Code pertaining to the regulation of tobacco-related products and flavored products.
Second.
I have a motion on the table and a second by Counselor Contreras. Further discussion? Did you have more comment?
Well, I think it goes to individuals' personal take on things where marijuana's fine, but alcohol's not a problem, even though it's highly addictive and destroys lives for people that get addicted at young ages. Last many, many decades, does a lot of damage. So there's a lot of things in life that do a lot of damage. If we're gonna ban everything, it's not gonna be much of a free country.
I do. I have another
Oh, you
question.
have more.
I guess I just want to say that, you know, we already have an ordinance in place for banning tobacco products for children under the age of 21. I don't see passing this ordinance as solving the problem of vaping. I think it's going to still occur. It's not the solve-all for it. So I'm gonna be voting no against.
My take on it, part of me views it as a quality of life. I'm a former smoker. I'm a vapor. I use flavored juice. I used the vaping to try to get off the cigarettes. I see our country, it's funny, when the vaping first came out 10 years ago, it was designed to get you off smoking so you could vape, and then that's a tobacco and it's flavored. And here we are 10 years later. Ironically, more Minnesota students are vaping marijuana, despite the increased campaigns against e-cigarettes. This is very simple to me. I have over 30 letters and comments.
Vaping marijuana?
Well, I just put in vaping into Google the other day, and I came up with 2 pages, and I just printed one, okay? It had 5 things, and they're random. The first one, more Minnesota students are vaping marijuana despite increased campaigns against e-cigarettes. Uptick in Minnesota vaping-related lung injuries linked to dangerous addictive e-cigarettes. Research on vaping isn't keeping up with the growth in e-cigarette use. East Metro Sheriff's prosecutors turned spotlight on increased teen vaping. Minnesota reports 2nd and 3rd deaths of use from vaping-related lung disease. Minnesota anti-smoking advocates applaud the FDA pledge to crack down on flavored e-cigarettes. I think we've evolved. I think Minnesota has always been a leader. We passed our Minnesota Clean Air Act back a long, long time ago, and that was kind of the start of no smoking in the buildings and public buildings, and then all out came the ban. Is this a perfect solution? I don't think so. Someone commented that the letters that we received say we're not going far enough. And we had a pretty lively debate at our home as well, and it veered off to banning a product. The cell phone came out, it's a regulated product, and yeah, now you can't text and drive. It's funny, we talked about marijuana, where now states have legalized marijuana. The car's the most regulated piece of equipment that we buy in the United States. Yet you can buy a motorcycle and not wear a helmet. Or why does a car have a speedometer that goes up to 125, yet the speed limit is 60 or 70 miles an hour?
Or you have to have a seatbelt on in the car, but in a boat, you have to have the life jacket handy, not on.
Handy, right. And it's funny because, and I don't wanna get, cause we had this debate in our house that went on for, and you went into different segments, and you know, it's funny because back in my mom owned a Chevy Citation with the automatic seatbelt that went on, you opened the door and got in, and that was gonna be the future, right, to get people to wear seatbelts, and we can see where that led. They didn't do that, and then it took another 10 years, or by states saying you got to wear a
Well, they
seatbelt.
put the airbags in, which
Oh,
now are
right.
dangerous and all recalled, and they're hurting people, so.
I appreciate all the public testimony. I met with a business owner in town. The gentleman that I met with on a gas station. In a gas station, I think their primary product is gasoline. And I think inside the store, as over the years, you go buy a pop of water. Those business owners made it sound like it was their number one product. And I went, that should be a slight accessory. It should be like water or chewing gum, but it's their number one product. They said they sell gas as a service. But I have received a lot of comments, over 30. And I think we should take this step as a quality of life issue for the city of Shakopee and its youth. And I smoked. My dad smoked. Those were the times, right? But smoking or vaping and now vaping, and I kind of go back to, wouldn't it be great if it wasn't available, then you wouldn't get hooked on it. And so, I think this is a difficult thing, but I think that it's the right thing to do, and I think we'll be amazed where we are in 10 years on this. So, those are my comments. Further discussion? 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 Sir, this is not a public hearing.
That is terribly unfortunate to hear. I was completely misled in that regard, so I apologize.
No, and I saw you sitting there. It's not a public hearing. We had online comments.
Oh, I'm the one business that will be put out of business by your passing of this ordinance. We don't sell to anybody even remotely close to the age of 21 or under. My entire clientele is 30-plus sex smokers who just don't want to go back to cigarettes, don't want to vape a tobacco product. The irony of this ordinance, and the main point I wanted to drive home before I left, was that it's a
Just, sir, rather than speak way there and the audience can't hear you, just give you a minute here. State your name and address. No. State your name and address for the record. Yeah.
point, I have inherited what's left of his business, as I'm sure many of you towards creating. And the point that I really wanted to make was that the people that you're putting out of business, the industry that you're killing, isn't big tobacco. It isn't the people that have been selling your children cigarettes for the last 20 years. It was the industry that was poised to pose an existential threat to big tobacco for the first time in the history of ever. And as a country, we decided that that wasn't the direction we wanted to go in, so we dismantled all of those small companies, or more accurately, are in the process of dismantling all those small companies. Mine is one of those small companies. I no longer manufacture the e-liquid that the people used to come to the e-cig store to quit smoking with, because the FDA won't allow it. They've put a very expensive lock in place. And what eventually is going to happen is that all of the market share will be handed back to big tobacco. You pass this ordinance, what plays out is a situation where the only thing available to the percentage of the population that will engage in risk-taking behavior, no matter what you legislate, we'll be left with exactly one company's choice. It will be a matter of picking product that belongs to Altria or a product that belongs to Altria. Or if you're looking for a little variety, you might get something from RJ Reynolds. The point is, this is a kind of a road to hell paved with good intentions scenario, whereby you basically are ensuring the market share for big tobacco for yet another generation. You realize that as a city, one way or another, you're not really making a contribution to the larger philosophical debate of, do we continue with e-cigs versus cigarettes? What's more civilized? What's better for us as a country? All I'm asking for at this point, basically, is a bald-faced appeal to your mercy. Let the federal government kill this industry on its own schedule, because they will, guaranteed. By the end of this year, the goal that you guys are talking about here will essentially be accomplished. And I will have a choice as a small business to either transition to traditional cigarette sales or close my doors entirely, which will likely be the case. If I get the chance to, I will continue my business through the entirety of the time that the FDA will allow it, and that will hopefully allow me enough time as a technically brand-new business to acquire SBA loan and continue to transition to a different business model.
Right.
But at any rate, again, I apologize for basically interjecting here, so.
Thank you for your comments, and we do not take this information lightly. There is a deadline at the end of the year that matches up with your philosophy of the federal government.
And that caveat, I again do thank the council for that in and of itself is very forward-thinking. And like I said, one way or another, if you pass it, I basically have a year left no matter what. But if, because the FDA takes forever to do anything, as most of you understand, I get a year and a half out of that, then that's 6 months that I get to pay the SBA using income that is eventually going to be taken from me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have a motion on the table and a second. Further discussion, discussion, discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-2. And thank you very much for the lively debate. And we will move ahead then to 9A2, the adoption of a property maintenance code for Shakopee. And Michael will present. Welcome.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. So we've talked about this for just over a year. I don't think I need to go too far into what we're trying to do here. Just about every city in Minnesota, even way out in the hinterlands, has been adopting this. One of the reasons is actually asset protection. You'll notice in our latest tax rolls, apartments are now one of our larger taxpayers. I think one of our goals here is to protect those apartments' value and their rentability. The other thing in the single-family home rental, that's become a huge industry in the United States, and some of you have read some of the articles in the Star Tribune about some of the big national companies coming in and buy 500, 1,000 homes and charge pretty spendy rates and really don't care about maintenance, and people end up having to fix them themselves and doing other things, and it's turned into somewhat of a crisis to the point of where some larger cities are actually looking at limiting the number of homes that can be rented in their community. Some people talk about that it's really not that bad here in Shakopee, and why do we need this? The police department was kind enough, they've had some calls for service recently, and since the chief knew this would be coming forward, he was kind enough to forward me some pictures. So this is one building that last week they were in. That is black mold, one of the worst products you can expose people to, especially children, has very detrimental effects. Then he was kind enough to send this lovely video to me. I mean, he muted the sound on it because he said the whole hall was full of it, and he said people were screaming, and he didn't really think it was appropriate to probably show that. So this is happening right now. There's nothing we can do under our current ordinances. So one of the things that we want to do is adopt that property maintenance ordinance. Our city attorney's office drafted, I think, a pretty good, up-to-date, looked at all the various ordinances, saw what all the flaws were in other ones, and I think crafted a pretty solid ordinance. And then they worked on a rental housing ordinance, and the only thing we've left out, if you decide to move forward, were the fees. So we put together, based on what other cities are doing, what some of the fees would be, and we would bring that back to you as a separate ordinance, as an amendment to our fee table at a later date. Happy to answer questions.
Questions of staff, Counselor Lehman?
So 9A2 is different than 9A3. One is for all properties and one is for rental properties. So the 9A2, since we don't have a copy of the actual,
So, Mayor and Council, you received literally the book,
okay, so
5 or 6 months ago that actually had the code, and then for the users, the people in the field, it gave a whole explanation of what the code meant and how it would be treated. So we provided that to you, I think,
so
when we
just
started
so I can be
this.
clear,
Yes, sir.
that was the book where I pointed out that the community carrying clause was struck down by the Supreme Court, and that was the book that said you're gonna go to every single residential owned property and force a search of the property.
No, what you're talking is actually 9A3, and this is crafted so it does not violate any of those laws. So the property maintenance ordinance sets standards and codes for how a property is to be maintained. The 9A3 is actually the process of how that will be enforced. And so there isn't a city here that barges into people's units without permission. So the way this would be structured is, if you own an apartment building, you would pay a fee per unit per year, and depending on how bad your building is after the first, all the cities do kind of level 1, level 2, and level 3 because they're having to go back multiple times. And then you would have a registration fee. That registration fee, basically, if you had 100 units, they may inspect a third of the units 1 year, a third of the units the second year, and a third of the units the third year. They're not going in barging into people's units. If you complain, like some of the videos you've seen, and you said there's mold in my unit, a code person would go out and document that for you and turn it into the owner and tell them, here's a condition that needs to be fixed. If you don't fix it, there would be that second inspection fee. If they come back again and it's not fixed, there's that third. And eventually it would come back to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, and there would be a potential to revoke your license if you're not fixing your units.
Okay, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
on the back page of 9A2, second paragraph, it said the code will apply to many types of buildings, including commercial structures, parking lots, multifamily, and single-family homes. So
Property maintenance ordinance. So we're adopting the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code, and we have made Minnesota has certain exclusions, and we've excluded those in this ordinance. But yes, our code enforcement officer that works for the police department could use parts of this code on a single-family home if they had trash piled up, for instance.
Well, the big book that I read the last time around was, we were talking about going to individual privately owned houses and getting an administrative search warrant to search their houses for code violations that we did not know existed.
Oh, I never
That
heard
is
that.
not accurate, no. We're not
Counselor Whiting?
going into people's houses.
So the way I understand it is the International Property Maintenance Code establishes minimum maintenance standards for basic equipment, lights, ventilation, heating, sanitation, fire safety, and according to the memo, responsibility is fixed upon the owner and operator of the occupant to maintain that code compliance.
Council, that's correct. So the police department, who goes in many of these apartment buildings for other reasons, our people would go in and say, this year we're doing the third floor, and one of the things they're gonna look for is, do you have working smoke alarms? If they're not working, you need to make sure they are working. Do you have exit lights? Do you have front doors that lock? One of the biggest complaints we get at the front counter are people that go, I don't feel safe in my building. And I go, why don't you feel safe in your building? Well, the front door is broken. I've asked the landlord to fix it, and there's people in the hall doing drugs. And I go, have you talked to the landlord? Yes. Oh, and the other thing is they break all the lights in the halls so they can do it in the dark. I mean, this is an ongoing issue. That building I showed you is not a random building. It's happening in this community.
Other,
Attorney has his hand raised.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, members of council, just so it's clear, the agenda item that's on the table right now is just the adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code. It applies throughout the whole city. You could do that whether you regulate rental licensing or not. So that's, the next agenda item is the rental licensing program.
Yeah.
I think that's,
adoption of the code with or without a license.
that's correct.
And then the other one is the true rental ordinance.
And one of the requirements of the rental licenses, they would need to pass, when they get inspected, they would need to comply with the International Property Maintenance Code.
Got it. Other questions of staff? Other questions of staff? On 9A2, the property maintenance code? Councilor Brennan.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number O2022-008, amending the Title 11 of the City Code for adding Chapter 82, adopting the International Property Maintenance Code, and allowing the city to publish a summary of this ordinance.
Second.
Okay. And so really, with the clarification from the city attorney, and city staff, the motion before us is not singularly for rental housing. It's for our entire community.
Mayor and council, that's correct. So I'll give you a good example of what we battle. So there is a certain piece of property in the city that I happen to go to every Wednesday, and their parking lot is collapsing. It's an out-of-state property owner, and there are potholes as big as that table there. Under this code, we could go out, and the police department's code enforcement officer could say, you need to fill in the potholes. We had this situation on a private road where the Taco Bell went in, and we pushed the limits of our statutory authority beyond probably reason to get them to repave that road, because we really had no tool in the toolbox to make that happen.
Right. And that was a brutal section.
And there are a lot of those in this city.
All right. Motion and a second on the table. Further discussion?
It would be nice to be able to read what's actually in it.
Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much. All right. Let's move ahead now to 9A3, which is the adoption of the Shakopee Rental Housing Ordinance. And I think this is perhaps maybe the bigger discussion point. Michael?
Mayor and council, this is actually establishing rental registration. Right now, we have a program through the police department that promotes crime-free multifamily housing. Parts of that have been, so basically this would repeal the current registration program we have and go to a much more in-depth registration program through our e-portal system. And this basically, there would be an annual license, a per-unit charge, and there would be inspections on the units, particularly single-family homes. I know that's probably actually one of our top calls, or people that either have rented a single-family home and are having issues, or people that rent single-family homes and are having issues with the tenants. And so I think this licensing, it's proven pretty well, I think, across the country, is a really good tool. I had a discussion with some of our staff that live in other cities, and they said, you know, this is one of those things that has stabilized a lot of apartment buildings. So I'll never forget one of the top real estate investors in the country. I said, how come you keep building new apartments in the community? He said, well, I can get top dollar. And I said, but what happens to the others? And he said, well, the A's become B's, the B's become C's, and you don't want to know what happens to the rest. And if you don't have something like this in place, it's going to be a huge problem for the police department, the fire department, and for residents. The chief said to me the other day, I can't believe people are living basically in these horrible conditions in these buildings. And he said, there's nothing we can do to help them. And I said, one of the issues right now in this market, there's no place for them to move, so they have no place to go.
Questions of staff? Questions of staff? Counselor Whiting?
Not necessarily a question, but can you put the picture of the cockroaches back up?
Yeah, happy to.
Really?
Yeah, let's look at that, because we've talked about this ordinance several times, and I've given my stories of living in some of these units, and there's times where there's nothing tenants can do. Now, if you have no place to move, you can say, you just move out if you don't want to live there. You know what? There's folks that can't move out, and they're living like that. And my story was the raw sewage from the shower or the bathroom above coming down to the bathroom in my bathroom, and that kind of stories, and flooding and different issues. It comes up. There's black mold issues. The city can do nothing about that. So we've talked about that. We've talked about this ordinance. They've done a lot of work. You mentioned that they've put all the proper language in here so that it's federally kosher, I guess we can say, and it's good.
I would, Mayor and Council, I would say we had long and many discussions with a individual on the city attorney's staff that actually is kind of a specialist in crafting these, and looked at all the issues, looked at all the court cases, and made sure that we were very tight and snug in all the language.
I think we owe it to our renters that sometimes don't have a voice or can't afford to just pick up stakes and move to make them. I'm going to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 02022-009, amending Title 11 of the City Code, repealing Section 111.18 residential rental property registration, and establishing Chapter 117 residential rental licensing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
I have one
Sure,
comment. There's a woman that I talk to quite often. I met her 4 years ago, and she talked about her neighbor across the street who was living in a residential unit, and there was squirrels that were running around inside of her walls, and the woman had tried to talk to the city about it, and the city said, well, there's nothing we can do. But the renter, she was petrified because she was afraid of losing her home. And I talked to this woman, I don't know, every 6 months, and are you working on it? Yeah, we're working on it. Yeah, we're working on it. We're going to get it done. So I'm really glad that this is coming to a close, and that it's coming on the books. So thank you to staff for the long time that you put into this.
Counselor Contreras?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I've brought many stories. We had two families move out from apartments not far from here because one of them, she had molds just coming down straight down the whole entire living room from the upstairs. Nothing ever got done. So they just left. I mean, they thought it was easier just to, leave. And I did go back to one, I remember, and I told them, well, you can fix it. She's like, are you kidding? And I'm like, and you can get reimbursed by the property, whoever's, the property management. And she's like, are you kidding? How am I gonna? And I looked at it, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, she's like, I don't have the money to fix it. And it wasn't a little patch, change a piece of dry ceiling, whatever. No, I mean, and it's not just that, because what they were doing is just painting over it. Quit hiding, quit putting a Band-Aid on it. So, again, Mr. Kursky, thank you to staff. I've been long waiting for this.
Others? I guess in my comment, I follow this pretty well all over the metro area. Again, over the last couple of days, Edina Maplewood toughens license rules for landlords. Minneapolis landlord, in a historic case, ordered to pay $1 million for violation of tenants' rights. Honest landlords welcome enforcement. Brooklyn Center, tenant sue landlord. Minnesota Attorney General sues hedge fund problem Landover about maintenance. And yes, we've seen a lot of hedge funds come in and buy single-family homes and B and C apartment buildings. And those are problems, and those hedge funds or out-of-town organizations they're investors, I get that. But you know, they're not our residents. And I think this issue is about protecting our residents and giving them ability to push back or to get action from a landlord. You know, Roseville revokes another rental license. Hibbing calls for landlord accountability. Columbia Heights. I mean, we're a town of 43,000 and growing. We have over 5,000 apartments, I believe. And it's really time, and this is a vehicle, I think, to protect our community, protect our residents. You know, we've talked about this 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. I've received one letter or email from a property manager here in town, and that was a while back. So I think it is time for our community, and that's my question. I do have a question, I apologize. So in this ordinance, are we going to be required to do the crime-free?
Mayor and council, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lehman?
And I will say that Mr. Thompson told me there are some current litigation about crime-free multifamily housing that we're not engaged in, but we'll see what the courts say about it.
Okay. Councilor Lehman?
I find it ironic that when the renters had the opportunity to stand up for their rights and they didn't, now they lose their right to privacy.
Councilor Whiting?
Just comment to that is you'd be inviting in an inspector, but my question is I think it's important that we take a look at the budget impact here. Somebody want to address that, because this will come with a budget impact.
Mayor and council, correct, that's why I kind of showed you the fees. Luckily, this will fall under the building department, which was, I think, at 50% of its budget already from a revenue standpoint by March. And so, luckily also our building official used to run this program at his last job, so we have some skill and sight to hire the right people. But it will, this kind of building, you know, we're gonna have to have 2 inspectors, given that we have 5,000 units, plus all of the calls for service for people that are calling in complaints, so that those people that have those problems, they'll be able to call and someone will be able to come out now. So it's about $200,000 a year, plus or minus, including the salary and benefits for those 2 people. And I think our goal is to, most cities try to cover some of that with the inspection fees and with the annual licenses, and I think we'll come pretty close to that.
Okay. The motion on the table, and a second. Further discussion? 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 All in favor, say aye. 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 Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Let's move ahead then into 10A, which actually in a workshop style. 10A, Shakopee Property Taxpayer Receipt. And Nate's gonna present.
As Nate is getting ready, just a reminder, a workshop is a little more free-flowing. Feel free to interrupt, feel free to throw stuff at us if you need to get our attention. But you know, generally, it's for discussion, and I appreciate that it's tissues.
Soft, yeah. No hammers here.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just a second here and I'll have that pulled up. So excited today to present the Shakopee Property Taxpayer Receipt. It's a tool that we've been working on for a while now. Been working in government for a long time, and it's, up until now, it's been a challenge to present budget and financial information in a way that's easy, understandable, and relatable to the average taxpayer. And I think this tool does that. Oops. The basic concept is that it provides an unofficial itemized receipt specifically for your home and how much you're paying for that city service. So actually, instead of seeing a lump sum on your property tax statement, you're able to see a more detailed version of what you're getting for your property tax payment. I also believe that this will show just how cost-effective city services are. So I will pull up, hopefully I have it loaded here. I'll pull up what it looks like. So this is the screen that you would enter. It would ask a couple different questions here. The first is, do you own your home, or do you own a home in Shakopee? And then if you answer yes, once I figure out how to work a mouse here, it'll ask for the taxable market value amount. So that actually can be found in two different places. One would be on your property tax statement for 2002, and the other would be on your valuation statement. And this will be the number, since it's taxable market value, it'll be the market value less the homestead market value exclusion, so you'll want to make sure you enter the right amount for that. And on here I have, if you click on the I, it'll explain exactly where to find that, and then it'll also provide a link to the Scott County website where if you put in your property address, you'll be able to pull up that information and be able to know exactly the amount that you'll enter in here. So for the example, I'm going to do the medium value home, which is $284,700, less the exclusion brings you the taxable market value of $273,083. And then before I pull that up, I guess I'll just ask the question, for the medium value home, how much do you think they pay in snow removal services, for example?
In city taxes?
In city taxes, yeah.
$375.
So the entire city to remove, all the snow for the whole year. So I'll have the answer to that.
68 bucks.
Okay.
That's probably better.
I'll have an answer for you here in just a second. So then you just click on the button and it'll pull it up in an itemized format, as I kind of mentioned before. So it'll break it down by, really I have the flexibility to do whatever I want for the descriptions or whatever services I want to provide. I try to base it upon what we have in the budget and what I believe people would understand. So it's broken down into the different service functions. Snow removal, average medium value home, $13.06 for the year.
That's cheap.
So when you put that in perspective, especially when you look at how much you would pay for somebody just to remove the snow from your driveway, and they're removing it from the whole city, it's a pretty good value. So these, similar to the last screen where you see the icons, I don't know what they're actually called, but the eye dots here, you can click on those and it'll provide further details. So if you want to know exactly what makes up these. So it also provides kind of an informative tool of, okay, here's the services we provide and here's exactly what makes them up. For example,
Cleanup day, that's surprising.
for example, parks, it kind of goes back into trying to put things in perspective of, okay, so for parks, I would cover the maintenance of 719 acres of parks open space, 45 parks, 29 playgrounds, 94 sports fields, 79 miles of trails, 37 parking lots, including labors, utilities, replacement costs of those park buildings and equipment. So when you think of it as $90 for to be able to use every single one of those parks, and just to mow your yard, for example, for the summer, I mean, it's more than that, and you have access to all these different amenities. So it kind of gives you the perspective of, okay, well, there's value in city services. Just a couple of items here. So these are based on the 2022 budget, which I think makes sense because that's what the 2022 property tax levy, and that's what you're paying your property taxes based upon, is the 2022 budget. Costs have been adjusted for offsetting revenues for those that pay for specific services. So for example, it'll say here with the ice arena that it's net of user revenues because that's primarily funded through user revenues. And then we also tried to really itemized based on how we budget and then what makes sense for the user, but certainly some of these costs can fall into multiple categories. You know, we used our best judgment when categorizing these things, but certainly there's more than one way to categorize a different type of service and different services within what we provide. And then I added, then one kind of final thing that's part of this is we added a survey on the bottom to try to also get feedback. So if you click on this, it'll bring you to a page, and I'll just ask a few questions of whether you found the taxpayer receipt useful, you know, what did you find useful, what can be improved, and then in general, what type of feedback you would have on the city budget or our services that you want to provide the city. And then if you enter your email address, these comments all go to me, and I'll have a chance to, you know, respond to those appropriately if anybody has any questions or comments or things that they want to provide the city. So right now, this is on our webpage. I encourage everybody to, you know, go out there and use it yourselves. And then as we move forward, you know, specifically this week, we're going to put a banner on the homepage to kind of further promote it, and it can also be, I think if you look back at the last screen, it could also be shared on social media, and that would be a likely place where you'll end up seeing it. So with that, I'll just leave it if there's any questions or comments that you guys might have.
Thank you, Nate. Very cool. Counselor Whiting.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. It is cool. How customizable is it? So let's say if we are thinking of a project next year that may have some public comment or controversy or something, could we put that in here to say, all right, we've decided to do this, this is what you're going to pay for it now?
So I can split the categories and define them any way I want. So if there's a specific project that has a property tax levy part of it, right, I certainly could split it out, similar to what we do with each of these types that we have here. I don't know how you would be able to do it to get feedback in advance,
right,
which might be the more troublesome. But
I suppose, yeah, if you're trying to project it, yeah, I could see that'd be an issue.
Counselor Brennan?
Yeah, it's a great tool. I tried it out the other day, and it was really easy to use and good to see the numbers that were popping up on my own property. And I could see it really beneficial if you were a person that was home shopping and wanted to come into the community and wanted to get an idea of what you're potentially paying for. So I think it's a great tool.
And as we know, Shakopee is one of the least taxed communities in the metro area. You may have heard that before.
What was that?
Yes, it's true. So, but, you know, in all reality, I mean, this isn't something that we have to do, but it is something to increase awareness of where your tax dollars goes. Hopefully, it will increase public input and comment as throughout our budget process. As you know, we start every budget year by having 2 public meetings with Nate and I, who sit there and we talk about the budget and kind of where we see things are going in general. And anything that we can do to try to explain where people's money go, because remember, we're taking money. From my perspective, it's always been that we have a higher moral responsibility to be accountable for every dollar that we use, because it's not a voluntary transaction. We're not going down and buying a shirt from Bill's Toggery. It's something that we're reaching into people's back pockets. And so as part of that, this is a way for us to help people understand where their dollars go. And once they understand that, they can say, oh, wait, do you see how much we're spending for X? Is that where our priority should be? Well, that's exactly what we're trying to get here. We're trying to get some input from the public on different areas. I think it's amazing how little, and you hit it on the head, snow removal. Think about all of the amazing work that our snow crews do and how little it really impacts the taxpayer.
Financially, but the impact
Oh,
about,
yeah.
you know, plowing the snow on time and getting to work and getting home, the impact. So, yeah, you're correct. Counselor Lehman.
Mayor, a couple of minor changes I would propose. When I look at this, it says 22 City of Shakopee property tax receipt. Now, we all know the old, you know, I bought this house and they said there was going to be a park in the future next to me. And There was never a plan for a park to be there. My concern is there needs to be a little parenthesis box below that line that says this is your city portion of your tax bill. Does not encompass your complete tax bill, which includes the county and the school and the other taxing districts and blah, 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 blah. Because what people are gonna, some people are gonna look at this and think, I was told my tax bill was $867, and why is it $2,500? This is misleading,
That's actually a good
Yep,
point.
that's a good idea.
okay?
Does not include the mosquito control.
Doesn't include the guy on the beach named Other Business. I don't know what his middle initial is.
Or the $20 that,
It's a $20 assessment, and nobody knows what it's for until you dig for a day. And the other proposal, if you go into your next slide, where you go into the survey portion,
Yep.
somewhere on this screen for this particular user, it would be good to see the city portion of what they saw on the last screen carried forward.
I'll try to address both those. Put in the disclaimer that it's only city taxes and adding some sort of narrative. I think I can figure that, how to put that in someplace in there. It's a little, they don't really have a whole lot of room to put a lot of the narrative in, but I think I can fit that in there. It absolutely will, if you put in the right taxable market value tied to what you're paying for city taxes. So that'll come to the right city tax portion, but like you said, there's other portions that I don't know how they're spending the money, right? On this one here, so this is actually being drawn to a separate link where we were able to put the survey and add the survey to it because we weren't able to do it within the tool. So I don't know how well I'd be able to pull forward that dollar amount into that. And I really wanted it to be a little bit more transparent too, as far as, here's a survey here, please click on it. But that's the best I could get it to pop out, the way that was
Okay,
hard-coded.
so we're gonna have to rely on them to be able to take that portion of their bill and carry it forward into their comments into the survey. Because my concern is if they're answering the survey based on just the city's portion, that's the information we wanna capture. But if they're answering the survey based on their overall tax bill from multiple jurisdictions, now we're not gathering the information we want.
Right.
They probably not see their specific, it'd be more general comment
Right.
of, you're taxing me to death, or something, rather than the specific, towards.
Well, I want us to focus on the city's portion.
Right,
Right,
right.
and
I-
that's
Yeah,
what we all want.
and part of it is that, as you know, as all of you know, because you've been doing this for so long, 98% of the people don't understand that very simple piece of it. And if frankly, we can use this kind of as an educational tool. It's like, if, for example, they come in, well, I don't think we should be paying for, some county project, for example. And we say, well, appreciate that, but here is the county, they're responsible for this portion of your tax bill. This is who you can contact, and here are your elected representatives. Because this isn't being taught anywhere in our school system. And most people have no idea how this whole process works, and that's why it's so important to try to do everything we can to advance that educational process, because the educated voter then can hopefully have a little more understanding about what we're doing, and if they don't like it, then they can intelligently and accurately talk about it.
Well, good. I worked this tool, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I worked this tool as well the other day, and I think it's pretty cool because normally what I do, if my city tax portion of is $876, I usually try to divide that by 12 and then say how much does it cost me per month, and then what do I get? Get a street light, a nice street in front of my house, snow plow, mowed parks, all those things. I mean, I like this. Had so many categories of things broken down, so I appreciate that a lot. I missed the bottom the survey aspect of it, but again, I think anything that we can do to inform, educate, get feedback, I think is very important in today's world. Obviously, if we all got our property tax statements and that's assessed and put out by the county,
for 2022, as well as evaluation for 23. And of course, folks like to look at the bottom line, and I get that, and I do too, but at least for the city portion, which we control here, that's a great run of items that you put on that, Nate, thanks. Counselor Brennan?
I just want to make sure, is the EDA included in this?
The EDA is not included.
Okay.
Separate levy.
Yep.
More
Yeah.
I didn't
input?
see that separate levy broke out on my tax bill.
EDA? I think the EDA was out, pretty sure.
And just speaking of this, I guess, we did all receive our 2022 tax statement along with our evaluations for 23, and we had some increases. My house increased it anyway, and I do want to remind anybody that if they're not that happy with their 2023 aspect, that if you look at the bottom of the form, there's a opportunity to contest that at the county level, at the assessor's office, and there's a couple meetings, and then if you don't go there, you can make by appointment, and the number is listed at the bottom of your tax statement.
And I believe if it's a certain percentage, you can get a property tax refund depending on your tax position, but.
More comment on Nate's cool tool? Well, I hope this generates some use, some knowledge, and I hope we get some feedback.
I'll just make one more comment. So they do have, they do track it too. So I have a dashboard, I guess that'll tell me exactly how many people are using the tool. So I'll report back to you with that and survey results sometime down the road and let you know how much it's being used and what type of feedback we get.
And we'll be rolling this out through social media and Hometown Messenger and making sure, drawing attention to it. And then hopefully, they'll come to that website. But then it's that secondary action we're really looking for is some engagement on the issues.
As we mentioned, the mayor mentioned he didn't notice that the little bug for the survey, maybe we can do something with that to draw attention to it. I don't know.
Agreed.
Excellent. More, Les? Thank you for that. That was,
Cool.
I found it pretty cool. All right. So let's move ahead then. Reports 11A, the city bill list is before us. Are there any questions, comments on that? Seeing none, then we would move to our liaison and administration report. We'll start down here this time. Counselor Contreras.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quick, the school board did find the person that was going to take Paul Christensen's spot, and her name is Carolyn Valdez. So can't wait to see her join and start working with the school board. And that's all I have today.
Counselor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. MVTA was last Wednesday. Contract with Schmitty and Sons, our operators and our mechanics, got signed, and so they're all under contract. We're working on a plan to take a look at the sustainability, and so the group that's working with us is going to look at the strategic plan of MVTA, the counties and cities that are their strategic plans, create some benchmarks, and do some kind of peer comparisons to kind of see where we are in the sustainability discussion. And a lot of that came back around to some of the EV electrical vehicle charging stations that are coming, going to be coming to some of the park and rides and things like that. We're looking at where those might be best used. And more discussion came up about companies that are out there that are working with cities, and in this case, Minnesota Valley Transit, to come in and put these charging stations in, and they're collecting a fee, and eventually, there's a payback on these things too. So we've had some discussions here at our last meeting. So these EV stations are popping up in many discussions throughout the community. We're also looking at a mobile app. It's called GoPass, and it's actually created by the Dallas area rapid transit. So we'd be purchasing it from the DART, and it's it really creates it has events modules and rider alerts, Currently, there's 1.5 million installs in 8 different cities, but it creates more options for you including using the bus, transferring to an Uber, all these different connections that you can make in a group basket kind of thing. So it's a really cool app, and that's going to be moving forward. It's going to take a while to get implemented. But, and some sad news, many of you might remember Robin Selvig, former executive director of MBTA, passed away recently. So sorry to hear that. That's all I have.
I'm sorry about that, Counselor. Counselor Lehman.
Attended the joint township meeting with the mayor and staff and the townships, and basically went over the land that's looking at being annexed next, and infrastructure and roads and what the future holds. So that was, I thought it was a pretty decent meeting anyway. I also attended a scale meeting. Kind of ironic, but we spent the first half hour trying to decide if we want to undo the efficiencies that were created through the pandemic or not. And then I went into this question of, I'm looking for this group to create efficiencies, and gave them one idea. And my efficiency ideas were turned back to the service delivery group, which happens to be our city administrator. But I'm looking for ways that the scale organization and its group of cities can find efficiencies for the taxpayers that all these entities serve. And I gave them an example. Both Councilor Whiting and myself have seen this personally with road projects in front of our houses where they tear up a portion of the street, 3 o'clock comes, they bury the trench back up, and the next day they come and they dig the same trench back open again. It's like we could get a project done for half the cost and half the time by a simple statutory change. You know, it would be cheaper with what you're gonna save in the construction cost of not doing it 18 times over to have a fence around it with a cop sitting there all night long telling people don't fall in the hole or fall at your own risk or something or whatever. But these are the types of efficiencies I'm looking for out of scale and its membership that we can actually affect, that actually saves taxpayers money, lots of money. It speeds up, creates efficiencies, speeds up projects. It gets you twice the bang for your infrastructure dollar. This is a win-win around the block in my mind. So I'm trying to come up, well, actually I sent the service and delivery contact, which is our city administrator, a list of things that I thought would be beneficial from an efficiency standpoint. But, you know, I've spent the time since then asking myself, is this where things go to die on the vine? Which it may be. Not personal to Mr. Reynolds, but, you know, to my mind, you'd think that we as an organization scale would be having these discussions amongst itself and not shoving it off to somebody else to do something with. So I'm...
Some of those efficiencies would be our contractors, though, wouldn't they?
Well, you know, I think there's room for all kinds of efficiencies throughout. And, you know, there's a lot of times where one of us, including myself, has an idea that I think might be beneficial, and maybe you have a different perspective that I didn't look at, and maybe I'm off base, and that has been the case on occasion for all of us. And that's fine, but until you have that discussion, you really don't weed it out. Part of that meeting, we went into the legislative update on the scales goals and where things are at the State House. And, you know, you all know, as everybody else, that there's division up there. There's only so much time, and nobody really knows where anything's going at this point, a little early. And then we talked, as usual, about future topics. You know, one of the seems to be a high priority of this group is who can we get to speak in front of us next? Yeah, it's great to be informed and stuff, but I keep going back to the original mission of the group, and it's to try to create efficiencies, and it's leadership. It takes good leadership to find them efficiencies, and that's part of the mission statement, so.
Always has been. Mr. Reynolds.
I hope it isn't where it goes to die. You know, it's been amazing to me that no matter who we have from city council who comes to scale has this very same thing. And you know, efficiencies are really literally in the name of the organization. And unfortunately, we see some kind of movement now to break away from efficiencies to make things more inefficient. You know, as we hear some of the things that the county is looking to do. And so I certainly hope it isn't. I like the idea of where we actually have the organization looking at ideas, and they may or may not pan out. But you know what? We're talking about them, we're analyzing them, and hopefully something can come of it. But you know, for those that aren't aware in the audience or elsewhere, every single representative who sat on scale has had these same exact concerns from Shakopee City Council.
Well, and just a couple of other things that I sent to Mr. Reynolds, I can't remember all four, but one was the market value exclusion. Now, all of us probably remember it as the homestead credit, right? But there was changes made to it. Now it's market value exclusion, and there's really no explainable reason of how it works. You know, there's just no mathematical equation that anybody can say, okay, here's how it works, and here's the formula, and so you can't really tell if it makes sense. But you can look at your tax bill and see, compare it to your neighbors, and see it does not make any sense. Okay, that's something that all branches of government want housing affordability. So they say, well, why don't we all get together and have a discussion about this topic and see if there's something that can be done with this market value exclusion that actually makes sense on the affordable housing side. I mean, let's face it, if you've got a $48 million house, you probably don't need that exclusion. But if you are low income and have a lower valued home, you probably look more for that exclusion as a benefit, okay? And these are conversations that should be happening and do benefit all of our taxpayers, whether you're county, city, or statewide for that matter. And it's a good conversation to have, I would think, but you know, it just goes over to this other area and you wait and see.
Well, Councilor Lehman, just I'm enlightened by your comments about scale, because we've been, from the day it was founded, and I was in a small room with some people that wanted to start that many years ago, and efficiency was great, and we were looking at using other cities' equipment from time to time. If they have, you know, some piece of equipment that we, you know, why should we all buy it if there's one? And that's actually one of the first things we did, and that created efficiencies. And then you look at it now 20 plus years ago, and while they have achieved some things, I think every representative on this council, but even furthermore, I hear it from my peers, the mayor peers in Scott County, that you know, that we've kind of lost that way. But I appreciate that, and thank you.
I just think that the whole thing has become, and this is just my personal observation, personal opinion, could be wrong, but it seems to be a lot of, you know, individuals are there for personal reasons, whether it's something for Shakopee or something for this community or something for that community, instead of being there collectively for the betterment of all.
Right.
And remembering that you're there representing your constituents, and we need to do things that benefit the constituents, at least within Scott County, thus Scott County Association. But, you know, it's become a world where everybody's got to lobby for everything and put their interests first, and it's just what it is. I mean, we learned from our leaders in the federal government on down.
It's a function of they want to share information and with the bigger group at the general meetings, and that's great. But then you're right. I don't know if we see the efficiency out of the discussion points of who we're listening to. But anyway, thank you, Councilor Brennan.
The SPU meeting was last night, and we appointed new officers. Kathy Moko was reappointed to president, and Justin Krieg was appointed to vice president. A grand opening will be held on April 12th at 8:00 a.m. for the new SPU drive-up window. So everybody is welcome to attend that if they can. I attended,
Line of cars or
pardon?
the single file line of cars?
Yeah, well, I'll drive through. I know I'm getting a cookie, or something like that. That's what I know. I attended the Scott County workshop last week, and they had five things on the workshop. And I attend this because it's not televised, and you can't really find notes on it. And, you know, I think it's important to find out information firsthand. And, you know, fortunately, the meeting this morning was televised, so I could sit in my home and watch it. So, but the 5 things that were on the workshop last week were Workforce Development Board. They're looking at the catalytic converter ordinance, and I think it's a copy of the one that we had for countywide. They had a discussion about their ARPA project update, which included Bona Vista Mobile Home. And
That's still on their project list?
yep, it is. I think it's going to be quite a while for that to happen. They're putting together a feasibility study with the owner of the property. So they'll be paying, I think the owner is going to pay something like 50%, and the county's going to pay 50% of it to see exactly what's that all entailing. There was also an emergency management plan presentation and redistricting. And there's 3 different maps that the commissioners are going to evaluate and decide. And I think that people can go on the Scott County website and give their opinion about their redistricting maps. I think that's all I have.
Counselor Brennan, thank you very much. For my mayor report, I attended a couple of chamber events, the Red, White, and Blues, back in business. Also, the Main Street Breakfast kickoff, Rhythm on the Rails was announced. They did review some things from last year, but really more important, forward thinking of what they're going to do this year, and some exciting stuff. So obviously Rhythm on the Rails being expanded by a week was kind of fun because we all enjoy that. Attended the Jackson Township meeting. We're trying to do those every 6 months or so, so good meeting. I agree with Councilor Lehman. Also, we had our SPUC joint meeting just a week ago, and you know, that's one of the best meetings we've had in 10 years. We reviewed where we've been and a lot of progress on all the action points. But everybody at that meeting, both boards, is really focused on facing the future and looking towards the future, and I really think that's outstanding. Upcoming, we're going to have our River City Pickleball Tournament at Lions Park, April 30th, May 1st. You do need to register. Also, there's free yard waste available at the ORF, the Shakopee, Miniwak, and Sioux Community site. And it's going to be free on Sundays from 8 to 2. There are 2 Sundays that they will be closed, and you do need an ID. And of course, lastly, I think this was in the SPUC bill, cleanup day, April 30th, 7:30 to 11:30. There are some fees involved, available for Shakopee, Jackson, and Louisville townships. And also coming up is Arbor Day, so there's a chance to order some really high-quality trees for your home. But that's my mayor's report, and thank you. Administration report.
Nothing other than I wanted to remind everybody that we partner with Bridging so if you have things that you no longer want in regards to home furniture, especially this year, we will have representatives from Bridging, which are actually my Rotary Club, Shakopee Rotary Club, that will be out there as well. They'll take that, the chairs, tables, whatever you have, couches, take a look at it, and then they'll repurpose that to give it to people in need. So It's a great partnership that we've had with Bridging now for as long as I've been here. And the other great benefit of that is that if you want to come and talk to your elected representatives in the flesh, oftentimes they're there taking your money as you are, or directing traffic on those particular days. So I've been guaranteed that it's going to be nice and warm and sunny on that particular day, so you don't have to worry about it. Come on out, bring your junk in your trunk, and we'll take care of it for you.
Well, great. Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much.
I think we should hold them to that sunny and warm.
I know,
We've had some cold days, cold and rain and
Rainy, miserable.
some tough, we work that pretty hard. We're, doing 2 a year, but it's a great community event. It really gets an opportunity to clean up and clean out and spruce up, and I think it's one of the best things we do in our community, and thank you for that. And so, yeah, I heard the weather's gonna be great. All right, let's move ahead. Item 12, other business. Is there any other business before this board? Counselor Brennan.
Yep, tonight we had the pay increase for SPUC. I would also like the board to take a look at the planning commission pay and determine if that needs to be increased. I think it's been $50 for a long, long time, and they have more responsibilities that are put on them. I know with the rental thing that we did tonight, and then I think there was a green program that we've also included in their job responsibilities, so if that's okay with everybody.
You already said that earlier tonight.
Yeah, I thought we did include that.
Oh, well, I wasn't here.
Stepped up. Oh.
It is coming back.
Watch the tape tomorrow.
Never mind.
Moment, you can watch the tape. No.
I do have one more.
Okay, well, we're gonna be out of time here.
Okay, I'll talk
Counselor?
really fast. We talked about the smoking ordinance tonight, and I looked at the penalties, and I'm wondering if we can take a look at that to see if we can put a little bit more penalty into our compliance
This is
checks.
on the enforcement aspect of it?
Yep. Because currently, I think the first incident is $500 fine, and I figured it out, and I think that's like 5 cartons of cigarettes, so I don't know how much of a penalty that really is for those businesses or not. And also in that section of the ordinance of 110-999, it includes penalties for children who are caught smoking, and it's a petty misdemeanor to get caught smoking, and I'm wondering if that's appropriate for us to do. 'Cause that's kind of hard.
Whether if it's enforced or not.
No.
Well, and if it's not enforced, then maybe we shouldn't even have it.
Clean it up. All right, what does everybody think? A suggestion about trying to give staff some direction on, well, I guess we already talked about the stipend for the board. But,
Mayor, I would just point out that items that are not on the agenda can't be decided. So I would say that what Councilor Brennan has brought up can go to staff. Staff can kick it around and bring it back.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here.
That's what I'm doing too.
Mr. Reynolds?
I don't know what where we get the penalties, so I'll have to research that and talk to Mr. Thompson. I don't know if that's state.
It could be state.
But we'll certainly take a look at that. And with the children, that's kind of interesting. It's always funny when you read some ordinances that have been on the books since like 1912 or something, and you kind of look at them and say, that's not really very good or kosher at this time. So we'll certainly take a look at that too and figure out what the history of that is. And
Cook a squirrel on a Sunday.
It sounds like something the school
Are they
resource
still,
officer
yeah, if you
could
bring a
use, though.
squirrel in now, is it still 5 cents, or did they up it to a dime?
The rat tail, you mean?
rat tails. Those are rat tails, yeah.
All right, thank you all. Any other business? Otherwise, we would move ahead to our last item. Counselor Whiting.
To adjourn to April 19th, 7 p.m.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn to April 19, 2022 at 7 p.m. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We are adjourned at 9:20.